So when you tackle the vampire subject matter or any genre film, especially by now, by 2024, 2025, you're faced with a subgenre challenge, the subgenre challenge, which is what to do with something that's been done to death, or in this case, undeath. You end up participating in an artistic slash pop cultural tradition that essentially forces you to create a work of fan fiction. That's the problem. That's the challenge. The original 1922 silent F.W. Murnau Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror, is itself a plagiarized film version of a vampire fan fiction since it's based on Bram Stoker's 1897 Dracula novel. So Eggers, in doing Nosferatu 2024, is doing a 100 years later remake of a film adaptation that has already been remade countless times, with countless adaptations done in between those remakes, with all kinds of pop cultural baggage, with all kinds of expectations, with all kinds of hype. It's a tough task. Tonight we're going to discuss it. Eggers, Nosferatu 2024. Ramos, what say you?
In your description of that opening, that little that little talk that you just gave, that I think hit a lot of great points and really captured a lot of what the problems I had with the film. I think what you have is a situation where a story is told, and there's very little that can be added to it. In doing a vampire story, as I was watching Robert Eggers' reimagining of Nosferatu, I realized that, and you can tell me what you think of this idea. You can make a vampire movie that exists as its own thing. John Carpenter's Vampire, Tom Holland's Fright Night, vampire stories that exist without the heavy-handed weight of Max Schreck and Murnau, of Todd Browning and Bela Lugosi, of outside of the shadow of the universal vampire. Yeah, you could do.
I'm gonna say yes. I agree. You can do that. Although I agree less with the fact that it's outside of that, because it's too hard to get away from the influence.
But this is the thing. Yeah. You know, that's gonna hang on, and those movies can play with the mythology of vampires in the popular culture. So there's an interesting little. I mean, Fright Night does it beautifully with its reimagining of the Van Helsing Dracula storyline, and it does it. I think it's probably one of the best reinterpretations, reimaginings, and jumping off points of what the story. Yes, homage. The problem that we're facing here is, I think it's impossible for a Dracula story to be told without the weight of Browning, Lugosi, Schreck, Murnau. And that's the problem with Robert Eggers' film, is that you're watching it, and I admire a lot about this film. The production value is incredible on this film. The cinematography is beautiful. The world that it creates is strangely real, but mythological in its depiction of an 1890s or so, not necessarily Transylvania, but Germany, and there are elements, and I think both Lily Rose Depp, who was surprisingly good in my opinion, and the always exciting and reliable Willem Dafoe, although I was disappointed that he wasn't given even more to do. I was hoping for an even more bombastic, crazy Defoe.
Mm. Okay.
But the film itself was ultimately disappointing for me because I could not get the idea out that it doesn't stray enough from the source material, which is not to say the Bram Stoker Dracula, but the original Shrek, Browning, and Lugosi. Not Shrek, Murnau, Lugosi, Browning. It's just too much weight to carry, and it's a fool's effort in a sense, because I'm watching it thinking all of the elements are there. The acting is good, the production is good, the lighting is beautiful. There are legitimately horrific elements that should make this a good film, but it doesn't have the urgency. It doesn't have the power that those earlier films did. And it's a technologically advanced, beautifully updated cover of a song that as you watch this new rendition, you realize it didn't need to be made. It adds nothing to the mythology. It adds nothing to the source material. It doesn't take it in new directions. It apes it in a number of ways without making it in any way distinct from what has come before, which is ultimately very disappointing. I was really disappointed, especially because Eggers was somebody. I don't remember what I said about the witch as I play the witch back in my head.
Yeah, the witch is a better version of this film.
Yes, the witch is a much better version of this film, but the power, the paranoia, the claustrophobia of both the witch and specifically the lighthouse are so much more powerful than anything that is achieved in this film. This is a failure, but I recommend it on the basis of it being a noble failure. I could see that there was actual love. Maybe the problem is that Eggers is too close to the material and reveres it too much to really use it as a springboard to something new. I mean, what did you think? What did you think watching it?
There's so much that I think, and a lot of it is what you think. And I when you say he's too close to the material, I agree, and I think he's starting to, and I'll get to this part later, but you fall into Tarantino territory when you you're trying to put everything in.
Yeah.
And I feel like it wants to be too many things, and it wants to say too much, and it wants to have all these different like themes and all this stuff that he's working with, because he's coming with such research and so many different interests.
Yeah.
That I think it makes it less clear, the story. But that's like problem number 2. Problem number 1 is that he already started off the vampire genre is like I said earlier, you by just participating in it, and I am guilty of this in terms of a project that I'm working on. I understand that. I'm sure he probably understands it. You end up painting yourself into that fan fiction corner. If you go back to a little bit more than 200 years ago, Dr. John William Polidori writes The Vampire. It's the character Lord Ruthven is based on Polidori's patient Lord Byron. Okay, the name Lord Ruthven had come from an earlier work that itself was based on Lord Byron. So this woman, Lady Carolyn Lamb, had written a work called Glenarvan, where she used it as a satire of Lord Byron. So this Lord Ruthven is already not fan fiction, but it's already based on something else that's based on someone else, right?
Yeah.
Fast forward, you have by the 1870s, you have a work called Carmilla. It's a lesbian vampire, so that idea of the lesbian vampire goes all the way back there. Written, it was an Irish piece of writing. It's going to influence Bram Stoker, Irish, who comes out with Dracula, 1897. Heavy influences from Carmilla. Obviously, Bram Stoker's book influences Murnau's Nosferatu with Max Schreck as Count Orlok. It's the story of Dracula, but the names are changed, the locations are changed. It's a work of plagiarism. In a sense, it's a work of, you can say, fan fiction. From the book and from Nosferatu, the silent film, you basically have two roads. You have the Nosferatu films, and you have the Dracula films. Like as you described, it's either go down the path of Max Schreck as Count Orlok in Murnau's film, or you go Bela Lugosi as Dracula in Todd Browning's 1931 film. Nosferatu, that path is Murnau, Herzog with Klaus Kinski, Salem's Lot. The Tobe Hooper, the depiction of the vampire is very much Nosferatu-like, based on the Stephen King novel. Shadow of the Vampire, William Dafoe as Max Schreck as an actual vampire. This past year that we ended, or the year before, there was another version of Nosferatu that ended up on Apple TV, where they used like colorized backdrops, green screened on, and then the actors were put on. I haven't seen it. I saw the trailer. Red alert, fucking behind me.
The rats are coming. The rats are coming.
That's up until this film. So it's like you have a whole channel of like, do you have the rat-like, bald, pointed teeth, like monstrous Max Schreck makeup? Or do you have the charming, noble, Eastern European Bela Lugosi that's going to influence fucking Count Chocula, fucking the Count from Sesame Street? Basically, all the other versions of the vampire are going to come from Bela Lugosi. Whether they counter those or what they do, or so now it's like, what game are you playing? What are you picking? Who are you doing it with? So going into this, I'm like, okay, what's going to happen? So I'm watching it. You know, what road? Obviously, he's doing the Nosferatu thing, but it's like, well, what elements is he going to take from the Todd Browning version, and what's he bringing in more directly from the book? And on top of that, it's like, what's the question I think a lot of us are going into is like, what's next? What are you adding, if anything, to this? Because there have been, if you think about vampire film and literature over the last 100 years, there have been things that have kind of like generationally meant something for the vampire, but it's like, but they don't necessarily go into like the broader like pop culture. And I think of, in terms of film, you're gonna either get like, think of them as 4 posters of the pop cultural of roughly, not necessarily, but roughly 100 years of cinema. You're going to get, number 1, Count Orlok from Nosferatu, the rat-like monster. You're going to get Bela Lugosi, caped, accented, the hair back. You're going to get Brad Pitt, long-haired, fucking, like, sensitive, handsome, all that, from Interview with the Vampire. Or a version of it you could also swap out to a lesser extent Gary Oldman in Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, the long-haired lover boy, whatever. And unfortunately, Edward Cullen from Twilight. Those, for whatever reason, kind of like as films, touched different generations. If you look at the literature, I Am Legend, Matheson, I think his was the kind of like baby boomer, Cold War, Last Man on Earth, Twilight Zone, fucking the vampire as what happens after atomic bomb metaphor, zombie thing. Salem's Lot, Stephen King, and I'm just throwing a lot of shit, but I'm kind of trying to make a point as to like what I think. This is purely my opinion. What I think kind of like was these really these markers on the timeline of the vampire stuff, whether in film or in literature or both. Stephen King's We Have a Vampire in Our Midst in Our Small America Town, also very baby boomer kind of like ethos. Anne Rice she kind of upended the genre because she brought in her book coming out in the 70s, and then the film adaptation in the 90s when there was a resurgence in vampire kind of like subcultural shit. Those are vampires for Generation X. They're vampires who are disaffected. Now you're bringing the dread in. It's like, okay, I fucking and Herzog's 1979 kind of some of those lines talk about that, even though his is not necessarily something that I'm using for this. We can talk about it. The idea of like, I have to live for fucking centuries. I'm bored. This sucks. Or, where do I belong? Why am I like this? I don't want to be this, but I like being this, but I don't like being this. All of this kind of, I'm the latchkey kid of the vampires is what Anne Rice brought to it. Twilight, whether we like it or not, I have no connection to that, no like appreciation for it, other than the fact that I think that it managed to strike some kind of nerve that I haven't figured out with millennials.
Yeah.
On a literary, with quotes, level, and also the films, but nothing else outside of like those major pieces have really gone outside of kind of like the times in which they were made. Even though all these ones that I mentioned are products of the times in which they were made, but they kind of like signal those times to me.
Yeah.
Versus like, for example, Lost Boys is very much like it's an 80s teen version of it. It's an 80s teen version of following in the footsteps of Interview with the Vampire, because it's kind of like, well, these are the vampire baddies. I'm bad now because I'm a vampire, but I'm still kind of good. But then there's the love story and the parental element and all that. If you do the hunger, if you do the addiction, Only Lovers Left Alive.
Yeah. All
those are versions, I think, of the Anne Rice tradition of like the ambivalence of the vampire. I don't know how I feel about this. This sucks, but this is who I am. This is also sexy, but it's also horrible, and blah, blah, blah. So, okay, all of that I just vomited out. What does Eggers bring something that's going to be like, is this the fucking film that's going to get Gen Z, who is old enough to be an audience for this, excited or blah, blah? I mean, this is, in my opinion, this is a Gen X kind of project. I think Eggers, age-wise, I think is like an early millennial. But in terms of it throwing together all of these fucking references, all this shit, all this research, all these vampire, he's a student of the vampire film. It's a very Gen X project. And in that sense, it's like you say, it's a fucking cover. So although he did this cover very well, he didn't bring anything new to it. What's next? That remains to be seen. I have expectations about the next thing that's gonna like. The last thing that was different to me about vampire, like popular cultural lore or a character, was Twilight. I wasn't satisfied with that. I wasn't happy with it, but I'm waiting for something to redeem that. And this kind of shit happens like probably every only 30 years. This film has a lot of elements that exist in the vampire lore. That can be good, but it's also kind of like, I think you start to serve too many masters.
Yeah.
It has the historical. So he's using the appearance of Count Orlok is basically Vlad the Impaler, Vlad Tepes, the historical source of Dracula, who was himself called Dracula because his father, it means like of the dragon or the small dragon. His father was of the order of the dragon, Dracul, and Dracula is like the diminutive in Romanian, so he's like the little dragon. It has the Romanian language, it has the clothing, this kind of like Eastern European, Hungarian, it has all that. It has the folkloric, it has the Romany gypsy kind of element. It features them more prominently, some stereotypes, some stuff that's a little bit more titillating. The woman in that dream, naked on the horse, which I was just kind of like, I know he's big on research. I was a little bit kind of, what's the purpose of this? I mean, not that it needs that, but I was also kind of like, how much is this going to be research based, and how much of it is just going to be like whatever you decide to do?
Yeah. Because
I was questioning like, in cultures that value virginity in terms of like for marriage, I'm questioning why you're having a naked female riding not side saddle on a horse, because of the high myth. So I was already kind of like, or every time I would see like a lot of extensive like occult stuff, I know those references were made in the original Silent Nosferatu on some level, but it just felt like you're trying to throw everything, including the kitchen sink, into it, and I want to know what you're trying to say. So the infectious, the plague aspect, which is from the original, or which is a remake, but you know what I mean, the Nosferatu.
Yeah, absolutely.
That has the Herzog, that has the fucking rats, that has the, is it the question of like, is this now, are you now including also these potentially fucking like German racial fucking like dog whistles, so to speak, about rats and what that could mean, like those questions. Bram Stoker's cultural subtext of fucking like these poisonous fucking foreign elements, blood, the sexuality, the seduction in all vampire works, the Ellen, the basically Mina character's existential fucking like ambivalence towards Count Orlok, like she's repulsed but also attracted. It has all these things that are in all the other ones, but told in such a way that I think it kind of it confuses the plot with the metaphor to me. Like, is Count Orlok an external evil, like for example, like Pazuzu in The Exorcist, or is it a manifestation metaphor of her inner demons, like the Babadook? I feel like this wants to be both, and I don't know that it works.
Well, I could say that it doesn't work. I mean, there are a number of moments throughout the film. Well, I shouldn't say moments, but there's an overall feeling that the film is trying too hard, but it's
Mm-hmm.
also relying on the legend
Mm-hmm.
of the story to do its bidding. So it's kind of relying, which I think is a cheat.
You have to know, you
Yeah.
have to be knowledgeable in order to like fill in between the lines in the spaces that he hasn't already like jam packed with details that are kind of irrelevant.
Hmm. It's a hard movie to watch because you keep, number one, I keep expecting more based on The Witch and especially The Lighthouse. Whether justly or unjustly, I expect more from this filmmaker because he has shown us that he he knows how to create tension. He knows how to create paranoia and characters that are struggling with both inner psychological demons and the weight of everything that's coming down on them at that moment. Um, it's weird, but with The Witch and with The Lighthouse, although those are stories that are taken from certain historical legends, or maybe historical tellings of diaries and firsthand experience, whether it be imagined or psychological leaps.
Mm-hmm.
Those films create worlds that are foreign to us, but are exciting and new. And if you're really into that type of storytelling, you're going to be taken aback. I mean, let's be honest. There's a lot of people out there that would have watched The Witch, that would have watched The Lighthouse, and been completely turned off by the style of each film.
Mm-hmm.
These are not made for popular audiences. Nosferatu, I think, is maybe closer to a studio bid for something that is a little bit more palatable. But I can see the studio looking at it and saying, this is not going to connect with people. This might connect on some kind of artistic. We might pull in an audience that wants to. It might be what we used to call a sleeper hit,
Mm-hmm.
which really doesn't exist anymore because films aren't given the opportunity to build an audience. But
Yeah.
the problem is that the film is too much in the shadow of what has come before it. And what's strange though is that that's a truth for viewers like yourself and you and myself. The average moviegoer that is buying a ticket to the AMC, to the Harkins, to the Krikorian, whatever theater this is playing in, they're not going to have seen Herzog's remake, much less Murnau's. So this is the first introduction to this story for them. There is a danger in what you and I do in that at our respective ages, we've seen a number of films and we've seen both the influences that drive this kind of a movie, but also where the source is for it. That's not going to be the case with your average moviegoer at this point. I don't think this is maybe this is the kind of movie that's going to resonate with a young adult audience, because that's basically what the studios are shooting for. I'd be interested in hearing what a teenager or an 18, 19, 20 or early 20s moviegoer would take from this. Is it scary? Is it creepy? Is it something that draws them in? You and I know the original. You and I both know how good the material and the story is. with this is something. This is something that doesn't resonate with us because we know. For me, it really comes down to if you're going to do something, if you're going to remake something, you're going to remake it either so differently or so much, or it's just going to be better. And this is neither. It's admirable in its filmmaking, and there's a certain kind of, I have to be honest and say that there's a certain level of appreciation for Eggers' both love of the genre and the original film.
Mm-hmm.
But it stifles the creativity of creating of a new impression of what's there. So, but that's for you and I who have sat with the film. You, admittedly, having said it's probably the silent film that you've seen the most of, which is to say, what, 6 to 10 times, maybe more.
Wait, you're asking me if I've seen the silent of all the Nosferatus, if I've seen the silent one more?
No, I thought you told me at one point that this was the silent film that you've seen more than any other silent film.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. So you already have an inherent prejudice, as I do, for what it is. Your average moviegoer isn't gonna have the patience. I mean, I hate to say it, but they're not gonna have the patience to sit there and watch the Shrek film. They're not gonna have the patience to see the poetry of Murnau.
I don't even know if they're gonna have the patience to see this film in its entirety because it's long as fuck. I mean, and that's not a problem for me, but I'm just I agree. Now we're considering the audience. It's kind of like, you know.
Mm-hmm. Normally, I don't consider the audience, but I consider the audience in this particular experience because I have to, as I get older in my viewing, I have to ask myself what is resonating with a movie watching audience that is separate from what I embrace and what I love, because I also know that I'm artistically and culturally elitist when it comes to this kind of thing. And I think the majority of people that listen to us on a weekly basis, people who have left, people who come back, they listen to us for in big part because they know that's the attitude that we're going to take in a movie. We're going to we're going to love.
We're not trying to do like the middle of the road necessarily.
No, not at all.
Like, although we're, fair and balanced like Fox News, like we are, it's not like we want to put salt in our food. We want it to have a fucking flavor. It's not going to be like, well, if you like it, it was good. If you don't like it, then, but it's still kind of admirable. And like, you can say that all fucking day and all night. Like, look, there are films that at some point, I will suggest that we watch it. I do not think this is a good film, but it's a film that fucking, like, for whatever reason, kind of has captured my attention since I was a teenager. It's called Nemesis. It's a sci-fi fucking, like, RoboCop-esque fucking movie.
Okay.
I watch scenes from that film, like, several times a year. But I only watch up to a certain point in the film, and that's it. I don't watch the whole film.
Okay.
I just watch up to a certain point, and I'm just with that vibe of that movie. I watch certain scenes from Blade Runner. I watch certain scenes from fucking
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
That happens. Those who are like us do that. Sometimes it's the whole film. Sometimes it's just scenes. Sometimes it's clips. We all understand this. This is the kind of film that I will probably like, and I'm willing to do that, to put it into the rotation up to a certain point. Is the build up in this film, the texture, the production value, as you said, is great. I really enjoyed the first, I don't know if it's maybe the first act, the first third of the film, basically up until he escapes the castle, the Jonathan Harker character, whatever he is in the Nosferatu film.
Thomas, right? Jonathan Thomas?
Yeah, Thomas. Yeah. The build up to Orlok, the introduction of Orlok, especially when he's in the shadows, seeing him. I know some people were freaking out over the mustache. Apparently, whatever.
What, upset about the mustache? You mean? Or
yeah, I think there was some critique online. Was like they don't want to see a mustache on a vampire, and it's kind of like, okay, go sit down and go read. Go sit down and read. Go read. And that's that. Take a break.
And use your words. Use your words. Just
use fucking Bram Stoker's words. And understand. Okay, this is what he got it from. Okay, and I liked the more that they showed of Count Orlok, the less interested I was.
Yeah,
I liked it when he was in, the crazy voice, the it is a bad omen, like that fucking real deep resonant voice with the super rolling R's, and I thought it was interesting. I liked the performance. I really liked the mystery of it. The build up the crossroads, the snow. I felt cold in the theater when I was watching the snow on screen, and I was like really enjoying it. As the movie went on, I was like less and less into it. I didn't walk out like Leslie was like. She was like, were you into it? Because even she was kind of like not that impressed. Like she was impressed with the production value, all that stuff, but something was just kind of like a little bit off. And I was like, look, I enjoyed it, and I really enjoyed the first part because I like the experience of the world that he's creating. Yeah. I like the dust. I like all the books. I like the claustrophobia of those spaces, those offices, those rooms. But beyond that, it started to get, I know that he's using all these details. He's kind of creating that world, but it became, I was more wanting to know like the big picture. And it started to get like, it was all the details that I was starting to like now question stuff. Yeah. Because I was like, okay, well, the plague, is it an actual plague or does it represent, like in Herzog, it's like, well, they think it's the plague that's killed the rats that are killing these people on the Demeter. But it's not, it's a vampire. Is it, again, as I said, is it like, is he an external? And I understand the idea of like, well, is it? You tell me, you're the audience member, you figure it out. I get that, and I appreciate that. But I felt like there was a little bit of kind of like mixed messaging with it versus just a metaphor. And then you can say, well, is this what's beyond what I'm seeing? Yeah. What is the metaphor? And then we know what the metaphor is, and it's like, okay, cool. The Babadook, perfect example. But now if like the Babadook is attacking other people in other homes, it's like, well, is it from their home, or is it like this Babadook that it's actually a thing and it's not this like external, like her externalized haunting kind of thing? Then he starts adding the element of like, is this actually like this demonic fucking groomer that she has to submit to in this male-dominated society, because now you're making like, you're doing that social commentary on top of it. And it wasn't clear enough to me. And not that I wanted an answer, I just felt that I wanted more of a tone where it's like, this is where you're coming from, rather than this is what you're referencing and these are themes that you're including in your film because you have statements that you want to make. Like, I want the film to have a tone. The film must say something of its own, like, rather than just the director saying something, imposing it on the film. That's what it felt like. And then the ending felt like there was this like fairy tale ending feel. Okay, the young heroine sacrifices herself. With Defoe kind of like giving that summation of like the fairy tale, like, and so the young maiden, blah, blah, blah kind of thing. But I think it would have been more effective if he would have been telling the story from the beginning.
Yeah. It definitely would have been better if the Defoe and it's not just because of, I think, our love for Defoe, but the character of Van Helsing is always more compelling. To see where he comes from, to see, you know, they allude to his background, but they don't give Defoe the meal to really chew on, to let you know why he's been ostracized, why he's been kicked out. And I think Defoe could have done a lot with it. I think he could have made it a more exciting film. I think there could have been, you know, that could have been one of the moments where it differed from the original source material. I was ultimately disappointed by that, and I think a lot of what you say is absolutely correct. It was, in a weird way, it's a little bit too simplistic. And
well, now that you say that, it's kind of like when I think of Christopher Nolan.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the premise is typically like simple.
Yeah.
But he makes it fucking like jam packed with all this shit. And then it seems like it's very complicated. But it's usually that, like, he's because that's like his thing. He's good at that.
Mm-hmm.
But when it goes off, where it's kind of like, no, you're just trying to fucking like Tenet, where it was like, I don't know if it works with that, which, I mean, we do know that we think it doesn't work with that, but it's kind of like in the moment you're asking yourself, does this work?
Yeah.
I think this film on a basic level, yes, it does work. I just think that this kind of material also deserves a very fucking picky viewing. And I think Eggers deserves a fucking picky viewing because he's that good.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I think, for example, let's go to, how much do you remember of the Herzog film?
How much do I remember of the Herzog film? I remember images. I remember Kinski, and it's weird because I don't remember the film as well as I remember liking the film. I remember liking the film a lot, and feeling that Herzog did justice to the material and embraced the legend of it. But here's the thing, Herzog is a true poet. And he's somebody who informs the material with a true love of storytelling. So part of me, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I don't know how beholden Herzog was to the original Murnau film. There was a great deal of it that that felt like an updating of the material, doing it in color, doing it with Kinski, doing it with Isabelle Huppert. But it just felt it felt like what a true reimagination should be. I wish I had had the time to sit down and watch Herzog's film before we did this. I just didn't. You tell me your memories of the film and what stands out in contrast to what Eggers has done.
The way I'm going to interpret it is that, or describe it, is that I felt that Herzog was a filmmaker, approached it as an artist and a filmmaker, and as you say, a poet, doing an homage to the Murnau film. I think that Eggers, obviously, I think he's a great filmmaker.
I think without a doubt, Eggers is a great filmmaker.
Yeah, but I feel like this feels more like he was a fan and a researcher.
Yeah.
Like primarily, and then that, like, the film was filtered through that. Whereas Herzog, the music was like different. The opening sequence of you have these mummies, and they're from Guanajuato in Mexico. So they have nothing thematic. I mean, not thematically, yes, but nothing like historically to do with the Dracula story or anything like that. But he just bribed a guard there, and filmed these mummies. And it's a small museum. You can go in there and if you're in Guanajuato, and like go see these mummified people. And he films them, and he just creates the tone. And he does things with the ending that are different. Yes, Isabella Gianni's character also sacrificed.
Gianni, yes. I'm sorry, I said Huppert. Okay, I'm sorry.
No, yeah, I mean, and she's fucking gorgeous in this film, and you've got Klaus Kinski and all his fucking craziness, and very violent and just weird.
Sure.
But at the end, fucking spoiler alert, the husband, the Jonathan Harker character, basically, he becomes a vampire, and he rides off on horseback. And so there's this kind of like this sense that, like, yeah, good won today, but evil is still gonna come back. And there was something kind of like, I felt like it was just kind of like, it didn't have to connect all the dots in terms of, like, you understand what the plot is, and you understand it was simple, and it was told simply, and it was just kind of like you're just watching things happen, and you get the overall sense of the thing. This had a lot of like references to when she was a young girl. She summoned this. She basically invoked fucking Orlok as a demonic presence, and so it has all this like backstory that you don't know about, but like you're kind of like told to, here's this seed of it, carry that with you, and kind of like it'll hope make sense later if you let it, and blah blah. And then there's this, and but because of her inner wilderness, in another age, she would have been one of the priestesses of Isis, and but now she's in this oppressive society, but she's summoning this darkness, but the darkness is actually a thing from outside of her, and it's actually bringing a plague, but at the same time, the plague can be seen as this metaphor for something that's taking over the whole city based on her lack of submission to whatever, and it just felt like it felt very heavy with stuff, and it was kind of like it's a song against the wind. It's like what to leave in and what to leave out.
Yeah.
Sometimes Hemingway has that iceberg theory for writing, where it's like you have this fucking iceberg of knowledge of your characters, of the story, of all this shit. All of that stuff, when you're looking at an iceberg, most of it you don't see. It's not most of it is below the water.
Mm-hmm.
It's below the surface. It should inform everything you don't see, which is the majority of the iceberg, should inform what you do see. I felt like this was kind of like Eggers was like, no, but I want all of the iceberg.
That's a good point. They talk a lot about that without really doing anything with it. It's, I took my nephew. I saw Nosferatu in the morning with my dad. I took him to see it. He wanted to see it. He's a big fan of the original film, and he liked aspects of it, but he didn't particularly care for the film as a whole. So we walked out of there afterwards, and we talked a little bit. And later on in the day, Heat was playing at a theater not too far from my mom's house. My nephew had never seen it, so I took him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's a 30-year-old movie. It's all
crazy.
there on the screen. But as the years have passed, you start finding out more about the story as it was written. Recently, it's been said in a couple of interviews and a couple of retrospective screenings with Michael Mann, Pacino, and De Niro in attendance that the character Vincent Hanna was a casual cocaine user.
Mm-hmm.
And when you hear that, you're like, oh shit, that kind of makes sense.
All of the screaming makes sense.
Yeah, a lot of it makes sense.
Yeah, because all of Pacino's characters have been casual cocaine users since Scent of a Woman. It helps to know that.
But if you don't know it, there's a kind of a strange understanding that there's more, that Pacino is, you don't know it, but you know that Pacino has built something into the character that is informing the action, not the performance, the action of everything that he's doing in it. It's there's something behind the character. With the Tom Sizemore character, Cirillo, you have a character who's a former heroin addict who has beaten his addiction. The peacock tattoo on his arm is covering up tracks. And
he's beaten his girlfriend too, off screen.
Well, there's that too. But the character, at least, is he has replaced the high of heroin with the adrenaline rush of the heists, of what they do. You don't know that, but it exists in the performance. You're right about Eggers. He lets you know, and I think by letting you know in the context of the narrative, they're talking about it. It kind of just is put out there and lays there. It doesn't do anything. They don't do anything really with it. They don't springboard off of it. It would have been a hell of a lot better if it was just something that he told to his actress, Lily Rose Depp, and said, this is something that is informing your performance. And I think it would have made it a stronger narrative. Because there is something in film with storytelling, well, storytelling in general. You as a viewer start piecing together the backstory of what might possibly be there, trying to explain actions, and sometimes you're woefully wrong. But that's part of the game. In this film, I'm glad you said it because I didn't realize until you said it. Eggers robs you of that detective role that you would normally play. So it's too blatant. It's there. There's no, so it kind of robs it of the nuance of what the story should be. There should be more mystery to it in her actions. I think it would have been a much better performance on her part if he had left a lot of that out. And she had just, because she's a highly sexualized character, more so than in the earlier films. It's alluded to in the earlier films. It's more so apparent in this film, but by giving it a name, by giving it a narrative history, it robs the viewer of that subliminal watching, that aspect of creating purpose and reasoning for behavior in a movie. I like
right,
that, you know?
And it also affects, like, because now that her motivation, the character's motivations come into play also. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, well, she basically summoned him. In Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, Mina reminds Dracula of his wife. And you get the whole backstory thing where they use Vlad Tepes, Vlad the Impaler, as this hero who's fighting the Ottoman Turks. Yeah. And then his wife throws herself in the river. So he fucking, he curses God and becomes a vampire. And then now, centuries later, he's like, oh shit, like, that's my girl.
Yeah.
Your girl is my girl. So I want her. So I'll trade you Monica Bellucci and 2 other hot chicks for Winona Ryder. Deal or no deal? And that it's like this love story thing. I've traveled oceans of time, all that, right?
Yeah.
This is like, okay, in the end, she basically gets what she wants. She has it both ways. But in the middle portion, in the part where he comes to her and he's like, well, you will fucking submit to me in 3 days. I felt like it was like, yeah, but this is what you want. Like, this is what you want. You know what I mean? Like, mm-hmm. And so I felt like there was more of an ambivalence towards her husband. Where it was like, it's like more of a cuckold story type of shit, where it's not necessarily like, and I hate to do this, but I felt like it should have been, I want you, but I don't want you, to Orlok, versus I want Orlok, but I love you, to the guy. I felt like there was more tension between her and her husband in terms of like the not loving him kind of thing, or the feeling bad about loving or being attracted to Orlok, versus like not giving into the temptation to Orlok himself. So by the time that she does give in to Orlok in order to kill him, I felt like it was too easy. It was achieved too easily. Like, I felt like she didn't earn it.
Yeah. See, I never thought the relationship between her and Orlok was defined enough to I mean, he's grotesque. Yeah. But what was the attraction? What was the power that he had over her, other than that's the story that we're being told. With Gary Oldman, you understand it. With Bela Lugosi, you understand it. With you're asking for a leap of she wants to be attacked by a creature. So is it a bestiality thing? What the fuck is going on with that? It's not clear. It's not and things don't have to necessarily be clear, but they do have to make sense within the narrative that's being told, and it doesn't.
They have to come from a position where it's like, even if it's like, look, it's David Lynch saying like, well, this is it's all a dream state.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna give you two conflicting fucking things, like, and you understand that now it's like you don't know what's real and what isn't real. This was kind of, she's called him, she's had this thing with him since she was a little girl or a child, an adolescent or whatever it was, and she enjoyed it. But then now he's like, no, you're gonna fucking submit to me just the way you submit to everyone. You have to submit to everyone else, woman, in this fucking society we live in. So, because that's the statement I have to make in this story, because this is the way it's written, which I mean, on its own, like, I get it, and I want to see those elements of that story, but it's just kind of like, just feels like it's being written because that's a commentary that Eggers wanted to make. And I also feel that it's like, well, she gets mad at her husband because she believes that her husband sold her by signing that document. But then it's like, well, but this is what you want. And I get it if you're going to, it's what you want, but you have to deny that it's what you want by accusing him and blaming him. But I need to see that in the performance. I need to see on some level, some sense of like of her like gaslighting him, or when she attacks him and she's like, well, she basically belittles his like sexual prowess or whatever, mm-hmm. and then they have sex.
But that seems like a dream. It's like Eggers not. I don't know. Eggers is all over the place with the storytelling on this one, where he doesn't do dreams well. There are moments where, I don't know. I just don't think he commits to the story that he's trying to do. It doesn't have that. It doesn't have a true understanding of what he wants it to be. It's like you said, where there's too much going on. Part of the problem with too much going on is that you have to sacrifice certain elements to make a story work. And I'm not talking about making a story palpable. I'm talking about making it. It's got to be true to the story. It's got to move the narrative, and it's got to make us. It's got to captivate us, while at the same time being in the horror genre and having that element of creepiness, fear, paranoia, and I don't think he's able to accomplish any of that really here. It's beautiful to look at, but it all falls apart when you start picking at the narrative. And for me, that's the biggest problem, is that it's not and we both know that it's not a problem with the story, because the story has worked 2 times before.
Sure. And I mean, the story has, has whatever issues it has, but mm-hmm. also like let's go back to Johnny's character in Herzog's Nosferatu. Mm-hmm. When he attacks her at night, she's like dazed. Mm-hmm. He's all over her neck, all over her breast. She there's a sense that while she is afraid of him, she touches his shoulder. she's in the throes of that's she's in his sway. So there is a sense of like, fuck, this is both repulsive but kind of feels good, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But then she realizes I can kill him if I sacrifice myself. And she makes the decision to do that. But that's kind of like a price that she pays. This again feels like it also to me felt like it was a way out for her to be out of that world. So she's like, well, we'll both die basically. Like I'll kill him, but I'll be out of this, but I still get to like have sex with him before I die. And like, so that's cool. But I feel like she feels like, well, all right, cool. But again, I don't feel that that's like, I don't feel that was earned.
Yeah.
On the part of that character, because it's also like, well, at the end, you just got what you wanted. And yes, you got what you wanted, but in a way that you didn't want it. So in that sense, it's you could use that in a fairy tale where it's like, well, or it like in myths and legends, it's kind of like you kind of see where it's going, but it turns out to be slightly different than what you anticipated. And then, well, now if you're doing a fairy tale, or it could be, well, the moral of the story is this, and you don't need to add the moral of the story in like in this day and age. You can have the moral of the story be like, okay, this is the metaphor. I get it. Babadook. It's not about fucking getting rid of the monster. It's knowing that you have like keep the monster, learning how to keep the monster in the basement, but you have to feed it. You have to learn to live with it. And how you do that determines how the story goes. That's a metaphor. It's not real. It's in the movie, the monster is real, but we know what it's saying. We know the commentary. We understand.
Yeah.
This is like, are you telling a tale, or are you redoing this thing with like all these other plot elements and details that you want to make sure that you would include in your version of this, so you're going to do that because it is your version of it. So I liked it. I just felt like it wanted to be everything, and it to a certain level. It has all these levels, but it wants to work on all these levels. I think it wants to work on all of them, and I don't know if he went into it saying, well, I want this male-dominated society kind of commentary. I want this. I want I want the infectious aspect with the rats, and I want to do that, and I want to work with all these rats as a filmmaker. I want to have elements of like Romani folklore, and this vampire isn't sexy. He's a corpse, but I want him to look like Vlad the Impaler, and I want this, and I want that, and I'm going to check off all these boxes, and I'm going to do my best to create the best movie I can with all these ingredients. It feels like that. It feels like he went in with this like wish list of stuff that he wanted to jam into the movie. It doesn't feel like, how would I retell what is Nosferatu telling me that it needs through me. Yeah. And I will try to be on some level true to what came before, but at the same time, giving me what I don't have. If you want to write a book, you have to write the book that you want to read, that doesn't exist. versus, I'm going to impose all of this thing. And that's what it feels like.
Oh, yeah.
So it's, and then, I mean, and this is not related to the film itself, but this is around the film. There's so much fucking hype around this film that, to me, it also like takes away. Then this is just me. This is just like, it takes away from the mystery of it. It takes away from the aura, because I don't want to see fucking Lily Rose Depp fucking, like, I don't care. You know what I mean? Like, I don't fucking care about how fun it was or how whatever it was to make this movie.
You don't want the interviews. I get it.
You know what I mean? Like, I think that there are certain projects that it's like, okay, but then certain ones it's kind of like, I want it to be mysterious. Yeah. And in today's world with the level of social media and the amount of hype that you have to create to stay relevant, like, I fear that we've lost that. And like you said, things are not allowed to build their own fan base. It has to be basically like created in order to stay relevant. And then Eggers, then this is unfair on my part. I understand this. I just don't think that Eggers like is interesting in interviews.
I wouldn't know. I haven't checked on it. I haven't looked into it. I mean, as far as I can see, it's just been the films.
I mean, that's good. Movies, and what that does to me, and again, this is unfair and somewhat irrelevant. This is irrelevant to the film. This is now just me adding insult to injury. Is that it's? I saw a clip and I was like, this is the kind of director interview that I want. And I just showed this part where, and I don't even remember what they asked him. They asked Béla Tarr something about, I don't know if it was his influences or whatever, his something about his early days as a filmmaker. And it was his response that interested me the most, and the style of it. And he's just smoking and he's like, I don't remember. And she's like, of course that's the kind of shit you want to see. He just was like somewhat eccentric. That to me added to the flavor as a side note of the fucking film, as like a special feature, so to speak, in my mind.
Yeah.
Versus like going on and on and on and on about fucking like all of this shit that you were interested in about the film and why you love the original and blah, 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 blah. If you watch interviews with Herzog, obviously Herzog is a madman.
Which
I'm not saying he's crazy.
Own, yeah.
I'm not saying he's crazy. I'm saying he's a madman.
Yeah.
And there's something that it's kind of like, there's something that you're going to get maybe that is a little pearl of wisdom or some kind of insight that maybe not, it's not necessarily like direct or directly related to the film, but it's something that can maybe apply to the film. Or maybe he's talking about, you know, when I was walking through Venezuela, blah, blah, you know, I'm making this up, but this is some kind of shit he would say. I was struck by the way that the sun fell over the trees and the mountains, and at that moment, a giant bat flew over me, and I felt, that is Nosferatu, that is Nosferatu. Something where it's like, I get it, and that tone channels into the tone of the film, and now there's something like that. I like that kind of shit. Something where it's all fanboyed out, where it's a lot of talk and not a lot of meaning, I'm not interested. And I feel like a lot of that is circling around this film. Um, and I feel like that is almost a metaphor of the film itself too. It's like there's a lot more to it that's being said about it and in it than what's being delivered.
Yeah.
Um, I think people should watch it again. I'm gonna watch. I'll go back to the first aspects of it. Anya Taylor-Joy was supposed to be the Lily Rose Depp character. She was originally cast, and
That
I'm
would have
like,
been great.
fuck. Yeah, I know. And no offense to Lily Rose Depp, but I just think that Anya Taylor-Joy would have brought something different, and especially already having done The Witch,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's like, what would you do with that now having done The Witch? No,
Yeah.
like, do you do a continuity of that we don't know about, or do you counter it?
But that's the important thing that we don't know about.
Exactly.
There should be the mystery. I like the
Yes.
mystery of what informs it, and I like part of the magic of movies or what the baggage that you bring to it and how you make it personal to you, regardless of what's on the screen. It's these are human stories with human emotions, and you watch them with you watch each film with an understanding of what how people behave and how they would react. A lot of this doesn't seem it doesn't embrace that idea. There's a lot of really good shit in this movie, but it's like pieces that don't come together to create. It's like a lot of I don't know. It's like a I can't think of a song right now with singers that I love coming together to do something that doesn't work. But that's
Mm.
the clearest thing that I can think. It's like the song itself doesn't work. The movie itself just doesn't work, despite how much talent is going into making it. This is a good bad film. I guess is the best I could say. You know what I mean?
Um,
It's a really good bad film. So that's
I,
the best I could say about it.
I'm not necessarily disappointed. And I went into this
Mm-hmm.
episode describing how difficult it is to fucking, like, once you start in on this journey, you know that it's like very difficult to bring anything new to it.
Yeah.
Especially something like, like I said, I'm waiting for something that's going to really, like, kind of redefine the genre.
Mm-hmm.
This is, and that's okay that this is not that. And it's okay that this film is whatever it is. But know that this is what it is. And when you said it, people have to bring their own baggage to it. It's like, yeah, I want to get on that train. It's like you get on this train, or on the plane. You get on the plane, and you're trying to put your baggages in the overhead fucking thing, but there's no room. And the seats they oversold the fucking plane, so you can't even get on the plane because it's so full of other people's fucking baggage that you cannot get onto the ride. So it's like, give me some room to dream. There have to be gaps.
Yeah.
There have to be
Absolutely.
silences. It has to breathe, even if it's undead. And there has to be room to kind of like fit in to those spaces. It's just, in a sense, kind of like maximalist like that, where it's just really full of stuff, and it's weighed down by it. But
Well, at the end
I'm
of the
glad it
day,
was made.
I'm glad it was too. At the end of the day, you have to watch it yourself and make your own decision. If nothing else, I hope for those of you who are starting your cinematic journey, this is at the very least a jumping off point to going back to the Murnau film, to looking at Herzog. I don't think you'll be disappointed where it takes you. You just have to be willing to take that ride, and that's all movies are. So, I'm glad it was made, just like you've said. I just wish it had been a little bit more challenging. I wish it would have challenged itself a little bit more. But that being that, what kind of a challenge can we extend to the listener at this point, Mr. Chavez?
The challenge of giving us your money that you probably don't have.
Yeah, these are hard times.
Buymeacoffee.com. Buymeacoffee.com/WatchRickRamos. This episode is our first episode of 2025, which is going to be a horrific year.
You got to have some hope. Come on.
So, I didn't say horrible. I said horrific.
Okay.
I don't know which is worse, but pretend this is not as bad. I want to extend thank yous to our members, Cornelius Burrows, Alan Lamberg, and Stephen Palmer. I also want to extend thank yous to those who have donated in the past: Slim, Spitshine Tommy, someone, Ryan Parker, someone, Jorge Salcedo, Ben, someone, Tommy Tickle, Charles Mahoney, someone, Rob Bundy Style, Livernois, someone, Jeremiah, Frank, Jeremy Slagoth, Danny Esp, someone. Thank you all. If you can help us out, it doesn't have to be large sums. It can be, some people are doing $5 a month. Some are doing whenever they can. Doesn't matter. Even if it's like, hey, reach out to Rick. He's the man with the email.
I put it out there.
Listen, tell a friend. Where's your email is what? gondoramos@yahoo.com?
That's right.
Just stay connected. Stay listening. Stay watching. We're going down this dark road. We will continue on it with you, with us. Have a horrific year.
Bye-bye, all.